in 59 minutes, or maybe even 57 or 56. We'll see how it goes. I may not always know what I'm doing, but I do it on time. My name is Chuck Ackman. I'm one of 3 people in the room that work for Senator Klobuchar. I am her regional outreach director. Been with her since '08. And I was telling Colleen, the only other time I've been in the original courthouse here was her first retirement party in 2009.
That sounds kind of funny, doesn't it, first?
Not anytime soon, but I will attend the next one.
Thank you.
Let me tell you about the format real fast. I know 80% of the people in this room, but we want to do introductions. I think we've got the right size for it. We're going to do introductions. We're going to do a video from the senator that's going to kind of lay out what we're talking about. Kurt Johnson, Ronald Lee are from our staff. They're going to talk a little bit. The topic at first glance looks a little potpourri. Transportation, broadband, housing. The senator sends us out on a once a month on a staff tour to talk about specific topics. This one kind of got thrown together a few months ago in a different part of the state, and we had a really good turnout. We had a really good discussion because those 3 things actually do intertwine. We got a lot of interest from local government, and I think when we do the introductions, you're going to see there's local government in the room, there's transportation in the room, there's a lot of broadband providers in the room. So we're going to start. I already introduced Kurt. We've also got partners from the state, so we'll start with Serge.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm Serge Phillips. I work with MnDOT in the central office in St. Paul in our government affairs office. I do the federal side. You know, we have a state, federal, and tribal. And I'm glad to be accompanying Senator Klobuchar's office. I think this is a really good example of outreach. And when we did it in the central northern part of the state, it was really valuable information we talked about and people shared and future learners. So I hope everyone gets a chance to speak today. Are utilities covered too in this? No.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's public works, not transportation.
Mark People, Blue Earth County Commissioner. Welcome to Blue Earth County and our courthouse. For those that are from out of town, welcome again to those that are from here.
Good morning, everybody. Kip Brunder, Blue Earth County Commissioner, and I represent the rural area, kind of the east half.
Dan Stilberg, Blue Earth County Commissioner. I'm in District 2, which is basically the north half of the city of Mankato. I'm also privileged this year to be chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee for the Association of Minnesota Counties.
Patrick Baker. I wish I could be a Blue Earth County Commissioner, but I am not. I work for Greater Mankato Growth. I believe they're not familiar with us. That's our Chamber of Commerce economic development organization. Visit Mankato and a downtown group and an ag group, all wrapped into one.
All good.
I'm Christopher Sasky. I work in housing and economic development for both the city of Mankato and Blue Earth County.
So I'm Nancy Volkman. I do also work for the city of Mankato and Blue Earth County in emergency programs.
Mike Leva, Mankato City Council at large, member of residents.
Mark Erickson, I'm a retired former EDA director and from Winthrop, Minnesota, and a past member of the RS Fiber Cooperative Board of Directors.
Brian Frederick, I'm the Assistant IT Director here at Blue Earth County, and I'm interested in the broadband discussion.
Jim Beatty, I'm with DevCom. We're a rural broadband provider. We're based in Blue Earth, Minnesota, but Blue Earth is actually the county seat of Faribault County, not in Blue Earth.
That's right.
And Faribault's not in Faribault County?
No, it's in Rice.
Is Cottonwood in Cottonwood County? Is Rice in
Rice is not in Rice County.
Okay, thanks.
I'm Brent Christensen. I'm with the Minnesota Telecom Alliance, and we're the trade association that represents rural broadband providers in Minnesota. And I'm from Medelia.
My name is Annie Christensen. I'm with the Minnesota Telecom Alliance.
Okay.
Jesse, before you go, let's catch the back row.
I'm Josh Limo, Deputy County Administrator here in Blue Earth County.
Bob Meyer, County Administrator.
Ryan Tilges, Blue Earth County Engineer and Public Works Director.
Carrie Harvey, IT Director, Blue Earth County.
Angie Youngerberg, Director of Business Operations for Human Services.
Lou
Jessica Beyer, President and CEO of Greater Mankato Growth, so the same organization Patrick just mentioned with all the different business units that we have.
Chad Adams, CEO of the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership, and for those who don't know about the partnership, we're a nonprofit community development corporation, generally covering housing programs and development in a 30-county area in southwest Minnesota, south central Minnesota, including Bloor County.
Good morning, I'm Mark Sharpless. I'm engineering manager with Consolidated Communications based out of Mankato, Minnesota.
I'm Andy Hennis. I'm also with Consolidated Communications. I am a internet product manager.
Kyle Hoffman, Community Development Planner with Region 9 Development Commission.
Abdul Aziz, Commission, Region 9 Commission HR.
Mike Rukowski, just live down the road, teach astrophysics up at MSU.
And Tracy and I write with the Blandon on Broadband blog, and sometimes I live stream meetings like this.
I'm Colleen Linehammer. I'm a Blue Earth County Commissioner.
And I'm Will Purvis. I'm a 4th District Blue Earth County Commissioner and also board chair for this year.
So like I said, I've been with Senator Klobuchar since 2008. I am in no particular order depending on the day. Her Southern Minnesota outreach guy, that's how I know a lot of folks in the room. I am one of 2 guys that does agriculture. I am her broadband guy statewide. She decided a few years ago that broadband truly was a rural issue, so she put one of her 3 regional guys into broadband. I'm also her disaster guy, so flood, tornado, Godzilla attack, I'm your guy. So that's why we're here. I will be the first one to speak. I will be the last one to speak. Basically, I'm going to get out of the way now and then jump up and say when the meeting's over. I'll facilitate any conversations. Rommel is going to start a video from the senator. I just watched it yesterday. It's like 3-4 minutes long. Kind of sets the table, what she's working on, and then we'll get into what you guys are working on.
Hello to everyone gathered today. Thank you so much for joining my staff for a very important discussion about Greater Minnesota's most pressing transportation, infrastructure, and housing needs. We look forward to hearing your thoughts, and they always share them with me, because each of you know firsthand how important investments in things like safe roads, bridges, reliable broadband are for our communities to thrive. Today's meeting is an opportunity for you to highlight some of your local initiatives and share your ideas with us. What happens then? Well, I get to raise these examples on the Senate floor. I get to fight for you when it comes to funding for grants and other federal programs. And then I get to use these programs as models as we fight for funding to make sure that we do not leave rural Minnesota and rural America behind. Because much of our nation's infrastructure, and you know this, is in urgent need of repair. This year, the American Road and Transportation Builders Association found that approximately 47,000 U.S. bridges are structurally deficient. That's unacceptable. We all remember when the I-35W bridge collapsed in the Mississippi River. On that day, as the eyes of the nation were on us, our state came together. It was those extraordinary heroes on the ground when it happened that saves lives, but it was also the work that we did together later to rebuild that bridge. As I said, a bridge just shouldn't fall down in America, but it did. And 13 months later, we rebuilt that bridge. But we didn't stop there. In 2015, we made a big step forward when we passed the FAST Act, which authorized $305 billion in funding for highway and motor vehicle safety, public transportation, hazardous material safety, as well as technology. That helped Minnesota a lot, but we have to do more. I continue to be a strong supporter of flexible competitive grant programs, from build to infra to SIG grants. I know these are critical tools for modernizing our infrastructure. And I know that many of our southern Minnesota towns, along with communities across the state, have benefited from the Department of Transportation and USDA rural development grants that improve things like local airports and fund much needed infrastructure repairs. Take Easton, for example. I was proud to announce last month that their community, along with Isle and Verndale and Woodlake and Dumont, received a total of $13 million in rural development funding to improve water systems and wastewater management. I think you know those aren't always the sexy things for the ribbon cuttings, but they're so important. Whether it's an aging water system, an underpass, a rail overpass, or a bridge or road that needs no reason that I should hear stories like yours, like the one from the Fort Ripley student who actually wrote an essay to his local carrier about how he had to hold his phone next to a window in his home to try to get a connection to download his homework. Or the farmers that go to parking lots to be able to do business, or the radiologist that can't get the x-rays from home and has to go to a McDonald's. We can do better. That's why I believe we need increased investment as an infrastructure and an infrastructure financing authority. These are the kinds of things we need to do if we're going to get broadband and the 21st century infrastructure we need to rural America. I believe so strongly that kids who grow up in rural Minnesota should be able to live in rural Minnesota with the modern infrastructure and all the opportunities that will help them succeed. So I want to thank you for what you're doing. I'm excited to hear about it. I know our staff's excited to be there. And I'll end with this since it's the holiday season. It's a story about my daughter. When she was younger, I don't know, 7, 8, something like that, we went to see that movie Polar Express. And when we came out of it, she looked at me and my husband. She said, you know what? There's one thing in that movie that wasn't true. And this is the Tom Hanks movie, right? And I say, what? I said, was it the way the glaciers froze over immediately when the train was going over them? So it wouldn't go in the water? No. I said, was it the million elves at the North Pole? No. I go, well, what was the one thing that wasn't true? She said, well, when the conductor, who in the movie is Tom Hanks, was standing there and the kid comes to the train and the conductor says, hey kid, come on, get on the train. It doesn't matter which way the train is going, just get on the train. And she looked at us, she said, Mom, it matters which way the train is going. That's right, it matters. Because if we want to move our country in the right direction, we need to invest in infrastructure. And we need to do the kind of work in our urban, suburban, and yes, rural areas so that we can export in this economy to the world, so our people can get to work, so that they can email people, and that they're not left behind. It matters which way the train is going. So have a happy holidays, and thank you so much for coming to our forum.
Thank you. As Chuck had introduced, my name is Kurt Johnson, and I do a large portfolio of transportation, public safety, and law enforcement included in that. And so with things that I think most people are actually interested in as far as updates, I can say from my colleagues out in DC, his appropriations budget is hopefully going to be voted on in the House today. Hopefully it'll pass. So we were looking at hopefully not doing more continuing resolutions is the big exciting update where hopefully we'll be able to vote on that in the Senate either tomorrow or Thursday. As the senator was mentioning, one of our biggest things is she does out there is for transportation is bringing grant projects down, to Minnesota to support these important projects that many of you we've either partnered with or wrote letters of support for. We regrettably saw that in 2019 we didn't receive those build grant projects that so many of which we had wrote dozens for, and the senator she led a letter with most of the Minnesota CONEL asking how that happened. It's important that we make sure that we're fighting to make sure that that process is being brought to all of the states, specifically because we felt very competitive grant processes, and so our office is going to continue to working through that issue to try to make sure that these funds are coming to Minnesota to support projects that local governments and counties and states need, because we know how important that they are. I can kind of talk more about, I guess, going into next year. We're looking at starting to talk more about the next FAST Act authorization. We're supposed to start having those committee meetings in either January or February to try to get to what the future funding will look like. So if you do have things, make sure you just get our contact so we can make sure that we're highlighting that and advocating for it as we begin the next year. With that, I'm going to transfer it over to Serge to kind of talk about what's happening in transportation in the state.
One other thing is did anyone catch the Secretary Chow talking about the Routes Growth Initiative? That came out in the fall. I call it an initiative because it's not a program yet, but they just published some comments in, or they're requesting comments from the state. It's ROUTES, all caps. And it's a new rural transportation, like I said, initiative right now. But they were asking a lot of questions of the states, like what needs do rural areas have? What makes it difficult to get funding? What difficulties do you have in projects? How can we help? Sort of like a lot of things like that. And the comments are due December 27th. I'm gathering them up from the different parts of MnDOT and other states. So do you guys know how to navigate the Federal Register? Do you ever? Yeah, I would encourage you to go on there and put in search terms like that, and you can see the comments from other states, but it shows a commitment on the federal level to try and see what can be done about funding, and by rural, they're talking about communities under 150,000 in many cases, yeah. But you know, we already have a planning process. This is something that we're trying to figure out with this new initiative. Like, how is it going to fit in with current definitions of rural? And of course, you know, communities under 5,000 don't get any state aid, don't qualify for state aid. So there's a few things in this, but I recommend looking at that. On the state level, we're working on Nicolette to New Ulm, Highway 14. So I know that's the first question. So we're working on it. Where there's a lot of that's a big topic right now. Long to go.
Oh, great. So yeah, Rommel Lee, everyone. I know a lot of you received emails from me over the last couple weeks here. For issues that are relevant to the folks here in the room today, I focus on housing, workforce, and childcare issues. So as Kurt said, now it's an exciting time to talk about some of these issues right now as we're approaching the passage, hopefully, fingers crossed by the end of the week, an actual budget, which is exciting news. In terms of housing updates from DC, in regards to the budget, Senator Klobuchar and Senator Smith, we sent a letter to the Appropriations Committee that diverts funds to housing projects and things like that at the federal level. And we put in an ask to make sure that funding was protected for many of the projects I know that are relevant to the housing advocates here in the room, including Section 8, Section 4 programs, the CDBGs, the Community Development Block Grant, the Home Program, along with the National Housing Trust Fund. In addition to just the non-budget related work, Senator Klobuchar has also been working with her colleagues in the Senate and we sent a letter recently to HUD Secretary Carson to sort of look into and investigate to ensure that affordable and public housing units have the safety regulations in place. And this was as a result of the fires that took place in Minneapolis a couple weeks ago. In addition to that, Senator Klobuchar worked with HUD, and we were also able to secure $3 million for the Minnesota Department of Health, so they can look into health and safety hazards for housing down in southeastern Minnesota. And the senator has also been supportive of other affordable housing programs, including the low-income housing tax credit and a lot of the rural development programs that come through USDA that the senator had mentioned in the video. So then I'll turn it over to Chuck to talk a little bit about broadband at the national level.
What I was chuckling at is when Rommel said a few of you may have seen an email from me. I know many people in this room, and you saw like a one-sentence email from me about 2 or 3 weeks ago that said, you're going to be hearing from this Rommel kid in our office. He's going to set it up. Rommel's been with us, how long have you been in our office?
Over 7 years, yeah.
He is far and away the most organized guy in our office. These tours don't come together overnight, and we've all just kind of learned, Rommel's going to put it together. As I said earlier, I'm her broadband staff person in Minnesota. And just a little bit of history on it, like I touched on, it originally, I think, had been considered infrastructure. So it housed in the Minneapolis office and was part of an infrastructure portfolio. And it was the senator just kind of one day saying, it is a rural issue. I want one of my rural guys on it. So I became the broadband guy. I'm one of 3 regional directors for just so you know how we're all set up. And then there's the rest of the staff's all Minneapolis. There are people in this room that know a great deal more about broadband than I do, so I'm going to be just incredibly brief here and talk about a couple of the 3 things that the senator's been working on, and then kind of connect the thread to them. The Broadband Deployment Accuracy and Technology Availability Data Act. That was introduced in July, requiring the FCC to collect more granular data on wireless, fixed wireless, broadband to get the data. The other one in June, measuring the economic impact of Broadband Act, conducting a study to affect digital economy, the adoption of broadband deployment across the U.S. Then the third one, the Broadband Integrity Act, directing the FCC to coordinate and share information with other federal agencies. There's a novel idea. But if you look at all three of those, actually let me add the fourth one. This was in the Farm Bill, the Precision Agriculture Connectivity Act, signed into law as part of the Farm Bill, establishing a task force to identify gaps in broadband coverage, especially in farms and ranch land. So the common theme through all that is data, is information, it's the nuts and bolts. The Minnesota Office of Broadband does an exceptionally good job, and I mean, I'm just to the point I carried around. I got a new one a couple weeks ago at a meeting, and I put it in plastic. But the Minnesota Office of Broadband does a really good job putting together maps. Like this one's my favorite one. It breaks it down by township. A lot of states don't have that type of data, and as everybody in this room knows, if you're not working with good data, bad data ends, bad product out. So much of the common theme that she's working on is data. So that's housing, transportation, infrastructure. Rommel, what do you want me to do next?
On that note, we'll start off just an open up discussion. Yeah, for the folks in the room that are from Blue Earth County and from the city of Mankato, can you tell us a little bit more about the current transportation infrastructure projects regionally that you're currently working on or that are on your radar? I know as Serge had mentioned, I know Highway 14 is the elephant in the room here. But yeah, if you could just describe some of the projects that are on your radar or that you're working on, and how at the federal and state level, how we can be helpful with these projects.
Well, I guess just to provide maybe a little bit broader overview instead of individual projects. We just face in general a pretty significant funding shortfall when you look at state and federal funding. On our county state-aid highway system alone, which is approximately 430 miles, we have identified about $11.7 million worth of need. However, the county state aid highway construction funding that's provided is only about $5.6 million. So we face about a $6.1 million funding shortfall on our county state aid highway system alone. Now, in addition to those 430 miles of county state aid highways, we have an additional 310 miles of county roads that are funded through local levy, local option sales tax. So we are grossly underfunded. We have right now a bridge replacement resolution. Prioritizing bridge replacements for Blue Earth County alone, there's a standing list with $16 million worth of bridge replacement projects of identified need. So in general, we need to continue to offer additional federal funds to help with bridge replacement projects to be allocated through the STPs, the 8 area transportation partnerships as well. And with that, that helps some of the funds, the federal funds, trickle down to the smaller agencies that are maybe struggling to compete at a higher level. We found it challenging to be competitive on a rural reconstruction project to obtain a build or infra grant. It's very challenging to show the economic growth component that's weighted into the calculations for those grants. So that's why you're seeing some, none of them came to Minnesota over the last year. But the 80-20 federal splits that gets distributed through the ATPs is another fantastic tool. So if that could also be additional funding could be directed in that direction, it would greatly help our small counties within southern Minnesota.
Ryan, I got one follow-up. I always want to make sure I got the terminology right. Yes. Blue Earth County has the most miles of river of any county.
Yes.
So probably per capita logic would dictate you probably have the most bridges.
Right. We don't have the most bridges in the state because if you look at by land mass, some of the other counties obviously have considerably more land mass. Okay. We have approximately 200 bridges in Blue Earth County, which yes, per capita is pretty significant.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up. And I should have said earlier, the three of us you'll see now, we're just taking a lot of notes. This conversation isn't in a vacuum. That we're doing one other meeting later this afternoon. And then we compile our notes and they move up the food chain through our office, move to DC, the legislative folks see it. Eventually the senator sees a summary. Every time we do these staff tours, she sees this is what we were hearing. So just so you know, it's not in a bubble here, that we're really just capturing all this information. So if we ask follow-up questions like that, that's why.
Thank you.
Great. In addition to some of the more funding challenges that you had mentioned, Ryan, Are there any other challenges when it comes to transportation infrastructure or public works even that you're facing at both the county and municipal levels? Or
we have a dam.
Our two biggest hangups for our projects are environmental permitting and right-of-way acquisition. And if the federal level environmental permitting, we have a project where because of delays associated with the Corps of Engineers permit for a realignment section, the project is, that component of the project has been delayed by 2 years now. And as you can imagine, that drives up project costs. So if federal Army Corps of Engineers, if the permitting process could be streamlined, made more efficient and delivered in a more timely manner, it would greatly improve all of our local agencies' ability to deliver our projects in an economical manner.
Okay. On those kinds of individual projects, we can certainly reach out to us for those kinds of things because we're pretty good about reaching out to the federal agencies and cutting through that red tape.
Because of the bureaucracy associated with consultation with other agencies that are maybe also not responding in a timely manner. So the entire process needs to be revisited and reinvented. In addition to that, Blue Earth County owns a 110-year-old hydroelectric dam that we would certainly be looking for future assistance with.
Rapid dam.
For repairs and maintenance of.
State or federal government wants to buy it from us.
We'll give it to them.
That's true. It would probably be
$1.
So I didn't realize that. So the county actually owns the dam.
My predecessor got the county board to acquire it.
Well,
it was MnDOT had it, right?
It was
DNR.
NSP, which
NSP.
was NSP, now
Yeah.
Xcel Energy. And when the dam was constructed in the 1910, the agreement was that the county was able to use the deck of the dam as the bridge over the river. However, in exchange, would it ever be abandoned, the county would then be responsible to overtake ownership of the dam, which after flooding in the late 1960s, we were blessed with the historic resource.
What's the prognosis on the dam long term? I mean, is it replace it, build a smaller one, make a bunch of riprap? I mean, that's way too much for riprap, I know. But what's the plan? What do you guys want to do?
One of the challenges with the dam is that there are 11 million cubic yards of sediment that have been impounded in the basin upstream of the dam. That by today's standard would be quite an ecological impact. Should even say 1 to 3 million yards of it be discharged downstream. So it's a massive undertaking to decommission the dam. Would be, I think I worked off of a 2001 report that I prorated the cost using construction cost index for inflation, and I came up with approximately $60 million, which is obviously a massive undertaking for a small rural county.
So that's a dredging project?
That would be for total decommission removal of the dam itself. Right now, we're taking about $2.5 million of FEMA funding to repair the apron that was damaged with the second largest flood of record that passed through this spring. 32,500 cubic feet per second of flow for about 3 weeks.
And that sediment is determined to be hazardous waste.
Sure. Yeah, because it's 80 years old. And
Yeah.
you know what's in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know we had some folks in the city here that wanted to.
I mostly definitely like to echo the county's comments on the need for infrastructure funding for a lot of larger scale projects, particularly bridge maintenance needs that are coming up within the next 3 to 5 years, as well as issues that we have related to not so much transportation, but related to infrastructure needs and protecting some of our resources along the Minnesota River. So we're having really major problems with erosion that's happening and causing, potentially causing us to lose one of our drinking water wells. And we are working to try to stabilize the riverbank in that area, but because of the extreme fluctuations in water flow in the Minnesota River, we lost 14 feet of riverbank just within a 1-year time frame. And so we draw a large percentage of our drinking water from the Minnesota River. There are times that we actually do have to mix that with water that comes from one of our deep wells because of the nitrate and phosphorus levels in the river, so we do have to mix. We do have other sources, but we do have a commitment to try to utilize that as our resource for drinking water instead of tapping more into the Mount Simon aquifer. So that's a major piece for us. I mean, it's erosion issues along well 15. That's the more critical piece that we're trying to work on in the immediate future. But we have the same erosion problems on other portions of the Minnesota River. I mean, we have our wastewater treatment plant or our water resource recovery facility. That's multiple millions of dollars of investment for not just the city of Mankato, but for the region, because we do treat for other communities that surround us. So that's a really big piece that we're trying to tackle, and obviously funding is a major component for that as well.
Great. So we can definitely circle back and return to the transportation infrastructure discussion, but for the sake of time, just because we also want to cover housing and broadband, I wanted to transition over to talk about housing for a little bit. For some of the housing folks in the room, can you describe the current housing market in the region and some of the housing challenges that you're facing here in the county and in the city of Mankato, and what's currently being done to address some of these challenges?
I think some of the things that we're doing really well in our region is working together with agencies, not just local government, but other nonprofit agencies, working on a regional effort to address housing and homelessness, specifically homelessness and emergency assistance. And so it's not like you see homelessness and you need shelters to address it. We know it's a bigger issue than that, but they need support services, and those support services are just as important as giving them housing. You can give them housing, but if they don't have that support service, they won't be successful. So those emergency programs are really important for us to end homelessness, and we have worked regionally, and we've been able to end homelessness for veterans in our area. So we have a system that's working well to do that. Because we're able to do that, we do believe we can move on into other populations as well. So that chronic homelessness, where they're cycling back and forth into homelessness, is our next major big group that we would really like to find a way to end that. And definitely it's working together with our systems and assessing what those people need, what resources do they need to help them stabilize in housing. And so more resources we have to address those issues, might more appropriately address how many people are actually homeless and needing shelters, if we can get them those support services and get them housed right away. Once we get chronic homelessness over with, we're also looking at youth, and youth is a big component of youth we really have no funds for, and we have a hard time even identifying youth because they move around so frequently. So we do have that system, and we think it really works well. We just need that support to continue moving in that direction. When you go beyond the emergency housing, then we do have those permanent supportive housing programs, our public housing and our Section 8 housing choice voucher programs. They're permanent, but we need those other services to help stabilize those people in those units. Public housing and Section 8 have not had new funding in many, many years. We're starting to see some for special populations, and so we've been accessing some of those resources to help people with disabilities, help with the mental health issues, because we do have an epidemic here in Minnesota with mental health, probably the region too, but we do definitely see it here in Minnesota. And so finding some of those resources. With public housing, we have found that even the federal government is having a hard time funding public housing, and capital funds are being reduced or threatened to be reduced, along with operating funds. So even in our community, we're looking at repositioning them into a program that's more stably viable under like a Section 8 type housing fund. So we are working on those type of things, but definitely even that housing choice in general for people who are working in our communities, the cost of that housing is increasing so fast that the jobs that they have are not paying enough to support that housing on their own, and that's where that voucher really can come into play. And those are the people that we can't even get to because we're trying to resolve these crises with people not being able to get into housing and needing a lot of support services.
And the city of Mankato does Blue Earth County's housing also. It's a partnership. It's always good to hear those things because frequently they think we work in silos and we don't. Chad, maybe you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to echo the collaboration comments. I mean, when we do projects in our 30-county region, we're typically not working with just one or two entities. It's usually 7 or 8 different entities, and it's really complicated, but it's worked very well. Historically, one of the things that I hear when I canvass these 30 counties and cities is housing and childcare are typically 1 and 2 of the top 2 issues. Broadband and transportation oftentimes fall in there as well too. But one of the challenges in the greater part of Minnesota is the workforce. There's a lack of contractors, and there's even a lack of developers such as ourselves. So there's an extraordinary demand, but the costs have risen so much, partly due to labor and some of the challenges with wages not being there to help provide the ability to achieve some projects, but just the cost of materials as well too. Just as an example, 10 years ago, we were building a 1,200 square foot split level 3-bedroom home for about $110,000, $120,000. That's well over $200,000 now. So it's difficult in rural Minnesota to find families that can afford that type of a product. So we're having to try to find more and more creative ways to partner, and the programs such as mentioned by Nancy need to be preserved. The low-income housing tax credits need to be preserved as well too. It's becoming more and more competitive, and the city of Mankato just realized that here through a recent project award from Minnesota Housing. But whatever we can do to kind of help advance and increase that in the future would be helpful.
So I had a quick follow-up. So I'm talking to developers across the state. One of the issues that comes up with low-income housing tax credit is just that there's too much red tape. It's just not efficient. And what ends up happening is, we in Greater Minnesota, we end up developing, I think it's like per year, less than 10 LIHTC, housing units or developments. So are you hearing any of that? Are you hearing any struggles with, utilizing LIHTC or?
Absolutely, not only with LIHTC, but also with Community Development Block Grant Program. In the greater part of Minnesota, that kind of gets funneled through DEED and the Small Cities Program, but that used to be a major business line of ours to do owner-occupied rehab, rental rehab, or just mixed-use rehab, and we're doing less and less of that because of the red tape. By the time we actually apply for the grant itself, it's about 2 years from that till we're actually helping a homeowner. And that's just too long of a time when a homeowner needs a fix or repair right now. 2 years from now, it's not helping. So,
that's for the CDBGs.
Yeah, from the Small Cities Program, yeah. And we're seeing the same thing in the LIHTC as well too. It's the time that you actually have to prepare. Right now we're already preparing for basically a June application. We find out in November next year. You're not going to be in the ground until a year later from there. So it's about a 2 to 3 year process for some of the tax credit projects as well.
I think I'd like to just add that one concern, that we have within Mankato, the apartment or multifamily housing units are being developed fairly quickly for our community. Not fast enough, obviously, because as soon as the units are done, they're filled and they're on to the next. We would echo that there's not enough contractors or developers of the housing, but they are being filled very quickly. But they're virtually all market rate. We've been fortunate to have a few projects that are funded through tax credits that are then affordable, but it's not even remotely close to keeping up with demand. I mean, in our affordable units, we basically have a vacancy rate of 0. If there's a unit vacant, it's because it's down for rehab or some improvements that are being done to the unit. And when we're applying, we were fortunate to get one preservation project funded, which is also critical. We had 77 units that were at risk of going market rate, and that would have been a major problem for the people living there. So we were glad to get the rehab or the funding needed for that building and to maintain its affordability. But we will have no new units come on that are affordable. And again, the process, I mean, we can always say, well, maybe next year, but really that's looking out, 2 to 3 years, and it's truly the only tool that is sufficient to create affordable units. When we look at other tools that we maybe used to use, they're not as effective because of the increased construction costs. So it really is, it's a problem that, without more funding toward that program or the creation of some other tool that can really assist in that, things aren't looking to get better in the near future, unfortunately.
And you're always kind of playing catch up in that sense, because after 2 years, and then things are changing significantly.
We never catch up. I mean, seriously, yeah.
Is it fair, whether Mankato or Chad, you guys can answer it, is fair to say that in broad terms, the demand right now is market rate rental, not so much single family residential. I don't see a lot of cities running around platting out single family residential these days. In fact, down in southwest Minnesota, there seems to be a little higher vacancy rate in single family homes. The classic World War II bungalow that was built in the late 40s, they're sitting empty. People don't want to live there, they want to live in market rate housing.
It does depend on the community a little bit, but for the most part, what I'm hearing is more that workforce rental housing, which
Yeah.
is 60 to 120% of AMI, so it's not all market rate, it's more that workforce, so.
Yeah.
And not low income affordable.
So I want to quickly bring in Jessica and Patrick to talk about from the business community what you're hearing in terms of, I know workforce housing is an issue out here.
Jesse's the
So what are you
president.
hearing from the businesses that you're working with in terms of workforce housing?
Well, it is, I mean, as Jen said, it is an issue, workforce housing component, right? We have been fortunate that we do have the market rate housing, you know, as even an option. You go to most of your communities and they don't even have the market to support market rate, so we are fortunate there. You just end up with that employee having to, you know, pay a higher proportion of their income into their apartment. I did it in DC for like 7 years, so I get it. You know, the nice thing on that side though is with unemployment being the way that it is, Greater Mankato has the fastest growing personal income growth in the entire state of Minnesota right now. So as housing prices are going up, I mean, some of the income levels are going up as well. So there is a somewhat of a silver lining there. And I would say, I mean, just on the single family housing piece, you're seeing quite a bit of that too.
Good.
I mean, the
In
city
Mankato.
is still platting single family.
Yeah, I mean, I talk to cities, it's like, we haven't platted a residential neighborhood in, you know, a few years.
We are planning, continue to plant those, and the construction rate, has decreased from what it was, prior to the Great Recession, and I think the main factors in that are, the availability of contractors and the price point. So we are certainly still continuing to add a number of single-family homes, but it's just not at the, you know, pre-recession rate.
That's good to hear. And before we leave Greater Mankato Grow altogether, Jessica Byers, President and CEO, before in a previous life, a county employee who threw me in a car one day 5-6 years ago and said, "You got to go look at the Rapidan Dam." So she drives it. So I've seen that dam. So Jesse, you got anything to add?
No, I'm about a month into my new role here at Greater Mankato Growth, but you know, as I'm meeting with different businesses and getting acclimated to, you know, working with our members, you know, housing does come up and the whole livability piece and with the workforce. And so, you know, for you taking notes and whatnot from the community, it's an issue and we need to keep managing that. I thought it was interesting you bringing up, you know, the minimum wage and things like that. And we just had a public affairs session last week and talking about legislative topics, and so it's intertwined. And there's some desire for, you know, housing. You know, we have to look at Mankato. There's other rural communities around, but also we met with our young professionals group yesterday, and there's also a desire for more affordable housing downtown for those young professionals. So there's a mix of those conversations happening. But thank you, and it was a fun tour. You guys.
I don't even remember what our meeting was about, but it was one of those, meeting was over and Jessica's like, "You're gonna get in my car, we're gonna go look at the dam."
Well, I think you were here for the community farm, and we just extended that to about roads and dams and all the other stuff.
I always joke, my job is I'm the show up guy, because you get into that type of meeting after the meeting that you were supposed to have.
Yeah.
So quite seriously, one thing that in our office, we use the term the power to convene, to get the room the people that are in this room right now, representing various agencies, city, county, if nothing else, when I'm watching the clock, if we can shut up a little bit earlier, just to create the opportunity, now that everybody kind of gets a feel for who is in the room, we can get some good conversations going. And I see the longer I do this job, the longer I work for the senator, it is all about just getting the right people in the room and talking about issues. Before we leave that, I want to just jump in on broadband. And like I said, there's people in the room that know a lot more about this than I do. Mark Erickson, before he retired, spoke publicly around the country on it. You're not going to speak now, but a serious expert on it. Unless you really want to. Brent Christensen.
I'm not the expert. Brent there, these guys from Bevcom, they're the experts.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm a community activist.
But you're a radical. But quite seriously, for the folks in the room, I'm going to go to Brent and give an overview of your organization. And again, just the gravitas. You hosted the FCC chairman in Medelia a couple years ago?
Yeah, last year.
And we had Mexican. Very good Mexican restaurant in Medelia.
Yes, there is.
So Brent,
Well, I don't have bad things to say. I wanted to say thank you, because your office has been phenomenal on this issue from all different levels. The legislation that you have listed here is all modeled after taking what we've done at the state to the federal level on mapping, on the Office of Broadband, all the things that we've spent a lot of time working to get done here and have done well. The help that you guys have given us with the FCC as we transition the Universal Service Fund from telephone to broadband has been incredible. All of the help that we've gotten from you guys from, on the USDA grants and rural development stuff has been phenomenal. So I basically wanted to say thank you. I'm not going to tell you a whole lot that you don't know. I mean, for those of you who are not familiar with some of the state broadband grant programs, Minnesota has a program that's been in place since 2014. It's being used, it's being called the Minnesota model around the country. I've had the opportunity to testify before legislatures in Kansas and Michigan on our program, because it's worked. We've done mapping in Minnesota, broadband mapping, since 2008, a year before the federal government paid for it nationwide. When they stopped paying for it as part of the ERA program, we continued to do that in Minnesota. So our maps aren't perfect, but they're as good as we can get them. Right now, we're always trying to tweak them. Our goal as an organization, and we represent FevCom Consolidated, my company, our goal is to get border-to-border broadband. It's the same goal as the state of Minnesota has. And so we work with local communities to try and do that and find creative solutions. And we've got some, I know I've met with Blue Earth County. There's some challenges and issues that you have in this county that are being worked with local providers. I will tell you, we have several counties in Minnesota that have complete broadband border-to-border in their county because it was a partnership between the county and the local providers. That's how it's gotten done. It's happened in Rock County, it's happened in Big Stone County, it's happened in Swift County, it's happening in 4 or 5 other counties now. So it can be done. We figured this out. One thing that we've done with the state broadband grant program that took us a little bit to do is dial that in with the federal dollars, because the federal dollars have different speed requirements than the state program does. Yeah. And we've been able to dial those two in together so the state program can complement the federal dollars that are coming into Minnesota. And when I say federal dollars for broadband deployment, there's over $66 million a year coming to Minnesota in new money to deploy broadband. And so we're using the state's dollars, dial those in so we can get better speeds, better quality service to more people.
And that was that Excel sheet you sent us yesterday, the 66.2 million.
Well, that's the total dollars that are coming into Minnesota a year from now until 2028 is $155 million a year. But of that, 66 million is new money. The rest of it was Universal Service Fund. So it went to pay for telephone service, now it's paying for broadband.
Good.
And actually, just to back up, because Brent mentioned it when you mentioned Rock County, and correct me if I get the terminology wrong, but percentage of households in the county that are connected to high-speed internet. That's the terminology. Of the 87 counties, the county with the highest percentage is Rock County. And I think I was sitting with one of you guys, Laverne, that I was sitting with one of you guys, and it was like 99.8% of the houses, and we were doing the math in our head. Rock County doesn't have that many houses. It's like 5 houses.
Maybe 6.
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting with the broadband guy, and we started doing the math and the population in Laverne. It's under 10 houses that don't have dependable high-speed internet. But it was a creative partner with the county, the local provider. So, getting back to extreme rural, there's not a lot of counties more rural than Rock. The only county in Minnesota without a lake.
Yep. Till the flood. A couple of years ago. Yeah.
I know you've got a couple of your providers here. Do you have anything else to add on broadband?
Well, we asked Consolidated to be here because they're the local provider. So, I don't know if you guys have anything to add about that. That's kind of the overview.
Can I just make a comment before you do that? It's expensive to do rural broadband. For instance, Lake County got $66 million from the feds and to do Lake County, and a couple townships in St. Louis County. So it's not an inexpensive undertaking. And so USDA Rural Development is where that money came from. So I encourage you to continue to fund USDA Rural Development as much as you can. That was my previous hat.
Yeah, that's your old hat.
Yeah.
But the Senator's office has been very good with.
They are.
We've asked for a letter of support
Yep.
to continue to fund those projects. And,
Yep.
you know, with the USDA's redevelopment or reconnect grants that are coming out, there are a lot of opportunities.
You know, and that's why I said it when I was doing the introductions. It was the senator just really one day saying, broadband deployment is a rural economic issue. I want one of my rural staff people handling it. And that was kind of a game changer in our office. It made us look at broadband differently.
Did we have any choice of who that was going to be?
I'm sorry?
Did we have any choice of who that was going to be?
I didn't have any choice. Fun little story, and the broadband guys know this, but the very first time I'm staffing the senator at a broadband meeting, you know, it's a conversation like this, and, you know, we put together briefing material, big shot. And on the way, she's talking about stuff in the meeting that I have no idea of where this came from. It's off the top of her. And we're walking out, and I look at her, and I'm like, what? And she goes, you know that I was a telecom attorney in private practice before this. I said, oh, okay. So I tend to pay attention to the broadband stuff. Jim, we interrupted you.
I'm sorry. I did.
It happens all the time.
I've interrupted you.
I would just like to point out that what the border-to-border broadband grant program has done for the state of Minnesota. Not only are those state dollars, but they've actually leveraged private investment or public-private partnerships more than double that. So of all of that money that's been infused into broadband deployment in the state, there's also a private partner or a public partner that has leveraged those funds to more than double that. We've been fortunate enough to have received 6 broadband grants in the past, and we are in the process eagerly awaiting our 3 broadband grant applications that we put in for this year. It's going to be highly competitive. There's $20 million available in fiscal year 2020, $70 million in grant applications, and I'm positive that they are all very strong grant applications. So I don't envy the Office of Broadband Development in having to make a decision as to which one of those projects. We are fortunate that for the first time in the history of the program, it's been funded for 2 years. So there's another $20 million available in fiscal year 2021. So when you combine those funds along with the additional federal dollars that are coming into the state of Minnesota, I think you're going to see a rapid expansion of broadband in the state of Minnesota. Minnesota has challenges. We have a short construction season. We have, the last couple of years, we've had weather issues, which have, flooding, rains, late snows, all of that stuff has delayed our projects. But we muddled through, and I think with the combination of federal dollars, federal grant dollars, and state grant dollars, within 9 years, I think you're going to pretty much see the border-to-border goal of the state of broadband real.
The only thing I would add on top of that is if you could find a way to help us with MnDOT, that would be awesome. We have such a short construction season. Permitting at the state and county level is ridiculous.
We also operate in the state of Wisconsin. We can get a Wisconsin DOT permit within 2 weeks online. In Minnesota, it takes much longer than that. And with a short construction season, that can make or break whether or not we finish that construction project within our construction season, which ends about the middle of November.
Tell you what, that's a good example. I just want to wrap it up now, but that power to convene thing, stick around. Let's try to get together with Serge and Kurt to see if there's something. But yeah, Jim, you've told me that Wisconsin story before, just how much faster it is to get the permits and the right-of-way stuff.
They have an online permit process that's not available in the state.
Minnesota doesn't have a great track record with online systems, so we're not advocating that.
That's good.
On that note, you guys got anything else?
No, this is the class I've been. I appreciate
childcare.
everyone's comments. My job is to mostly listen if I'm doing it right. So really appreciate this feedback. Come grab us. As we're gonna have time, we're gonna be around for a little while afterwards. So make sure you get our cards if you need them.
One thing I will mention, and this is not just broadband or transportation or housing related, for anything at the federal level, if you're applying for any sort of competitive grant funding, please keep our office in the loop, because what our office will then do is we'll have the senator reach out to whatever agency or department head, and just let them know that hey, this is a very important project for Minnesota, for this region of Minnesota. So.
That last person to speak.
No, that's right. So yeah, what Kurt said is we can hang around for maybe another 20 minutes, half hour. I sure want to follow up on that right-of-way thing. That's important. Thanks for coming in. Like I said, we can get people in the room, but it's going to be a great opportunity now to talk to each other offline, talk to us offline, and some of you will see us in Wyndham in a couple hours. Or is it a whole new group? It'll be a whole new group, and oh, good. Then I can tell the same stories again. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.